Yeah. Welcome to Los Angeles Real. My name is Christian Monzon, coming to you straight from Monzon Manor, deep in the heart of Tarzana. In our neck of the woods today, we've got California State Senator Alex Padilla. Visit his website, padilla4sofs.com. As always, you could download anything Los Angeles Real on our website, www.losangelesreal.net. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all social media. Go on the iTunes market, type in Los Angeles Real Show, download the app, share it with your friends, help us out. We appreciate your support, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome to Los Angeles Real. My name is Christian Monzon.
My name is Thomas Faustine Husking.
Yeah, it's still you, man. You look nice today, though.
Thank you. I dressed up because of our special guest today.
Yes. In the studio, we are honored to have Senator Alex Padilla. Thank you for being here today, man.
Well, thank you guys for having me. It's an honor. I know this. I'm in on the ground floor with this show.
That's right. Absolutely.
The honor's all ours, man. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely, man. It's a long time coming, man. You've been busy.
I know. Apologies. We've been trying to set this up for a couple of months, but as I've told you, and I haven't told you yet, I'm busier than I've ever been in my life, but I'm also happier than I've ever been in my life. So we'll have a lot to talk about today.
Amen to that, man. First and foremost, congratulations on your new addition to the family.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, congrats on that. I just saw that child.
Baby
almost
Alex.
5 months. And yes, we're sleeping. We've been blessed. He's been a pretty good kid. So, the family front's always first and foremost. We're happy there. Angela's been great and supportive of me keeping the day job. So,
yeah, right.
Things are good. I'm blessed.
Very nice. Well, can you take us through for those that don't know, Alex has, well, I'd rather you tell it in your own words of how you've gotten to where you are today, because there are a lot of bullet points here, but it sounds nicer when you say it.
And I'll try to be brief because life's been an adventure, and I often think I'm the Forrest Gump of politics.
That's what I think too. That's so weird.
It hasn't always been by design. I've been blessed with opportunities and either the courage or the not knowing any better to kind of take a leap at opportunities that have come my way. Grew up in the San Fernando Valley, son of immigrants. My parents are from Mexico, product of public schools and Little League baseball, and somebody put it in my head that I ought to consider going into engineering and apply to the school back east called MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And so I did. Got in, and 4 years later, 4 cold winters later, graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering and moved back to home here in LA. And at the time, just like kind of we're recovering from right now, the economy wasn't the greatest. So I was working at Hughes Aircraft for a little while. In a down economy, it wasn't the most exciting, fulfilling job for me. And I thought at the time, well, before rushing into the next engineering gig, let me sort of see what else is out there. Applied and went through a fellowship program called the Coro Fellows Program, which is sort of a cross-section of experiences. For the course of a year, you do a series of internships in the private sector, in the public sector, on a political campaign, with the labor union, with the media organization, with the nonprofit. And one of the core lessons I got out of that program was if you're trying to change the world in a big way or in a small way, there's no sector of society that does it on its own. Government can't do it without a strong private sector. The private sector can't do it without, community-based stuff that's happening, on and on and on. It's really how the different segments sort of intersect and collaborate. And it just so happened that coming out of that program, one of the first opportunities I had was to work on a political campaign. For me, it was personal. Even before I got into any particular issues, whether it's gun control is something talked about a lot about right now. Healthcare is another thing talked a lot about right now. And even before it got too partisan for me, I'm a proud Democrat, but even that wasn't really the driving force for me. It was someone who had become a friend by the name of Tony Cardenas was running for office for the very first time for state assembly in the district where I was born in, where I was raised in, where my parents lived, where I lived, where I saw my future. And I thought, as cynical as I was about government and politics at the time, maybe this is a way to effectuate change, at least in who represents me. So I got involved in his campaign, and one thing led to another. He asked me to be his campaign manager. I told him, I didn't know the first thing about managing campaigns. And he shared with me, I've never run for office before either, so let's figure this out together.
Did you read that book called How to Win a Local Election?
I did not.
Did you read any literature that is like, I don't know, that helped you in that process?
No, not a ton of literature, but he had a couple of supporters that did have more political experience. So a couple of mentors I got along the way of, how to organize a political campaign and how to recruit volunteers and how to communicate to voters. And but we literally did just learn as we went. And our biggest strength is something that you couldn't learn. We had roots in the Northeast San Fernando Valley. So campaigning wasn't a scientific, how do we reach out to voters?
Right.
It was, okay, let's just call our friends, let's call our family, let's call our neighbors, let's call the people we know from church, from school, from Little League, and if they don't know me, they know my sister, that sort of thing that in hindsight is what people refer to as community organizing. How do you, organize people around an idea, around a cause or something like that, for the purpose. And our purpose was getting people to vote for Tony on Election Day. And he ended up winning against two very well-funded and politically connected opponent. And, from there, that's where the Forrest Gump stuff kind of kicked in. Ended up getting a call from Senator Feinstein's office, went to work for her for a year, came back and worked for the legislature, managed a few more campaigns before running for office myself.
You're pretty young at this point.
Yeah, so it's 1999. I'm 25, turning 26, and had the audacity to run for city council in the city of Los Angeles. Again, one of those, was that a bold move? Was that didn't know any better? But the same thing for me, it was personal because I was running to represent the district where I grew up.
What capacity were you working for Ms. Feinstein?
I worked in her Los Angeles office. I didn't work in Washington, D.C., and I was primarily her eyes and her ears, her liaison, if you will, to everywhere from Pomona through San Luis Obispo County. But depending on the project or the issue, I'd travel up and down the state for her.
And did this did it stem from from Tony's victory?
Yeah, it was right after Tony's victory that I got a couple phone calls saying, "Hey, there's an opening in that office. I think you'd be good, and you ought to check it out." And at first, I was pretty resistant, to be honest with you. I had a plan of I'm just sticking close to home, or maybe going with Tony to work in the Capitol in his legislative office. And some people said, what are you thinking? This is a United States Senator here. People are dying to work for a United States Senator, not the other way around. If they're calling you, you ought to consider it. So just go interview. And
that's great.
Did do my reading on the senator before going to that interview and realized, you know what, they're absolutely right. This is an opportunity that most people would die for. So let me go and contribute however I can, learn whatever I can, and it was a great year for me.
Were they amazed that you came from a mechanical engineering background, given that you were just so good at this stuff right off the bat?
To this day, people ask, so how do you go from engineering to politics?
Exactly.
And there's the long version of, what was happening in my life. One step leads to another. But I think fundamentally, what I like to share with people is, look, engineers are trained to solve problems. And I like to think that's what this job is about. Maybe the problems we're trying to tackle are more complicated. It's not just number crunching that's going to give us a solution to whether it's climate change, whether it's reforming education, or even something like balancing a budget. But that analytical thought process, knowing how to ask questions, as Albert Einstein, I see the poster on the wall here, the right questions are more important than answers. It's that process that I think has contributed to my success thus far, both in my former city capacity and now at the state.
Now, you talking about the city council. You were the first Latino ever elected as president of the city council.
Right.
And the youngest.
At 26.
26 to the council, and then 2 years later to president of the council. And, for me, that was pretty heady. When I was first elected, part of the political context was in 1993, the voters of Los Angeles adopted term limits. So starting from that day forward, members of the council could only serve 2 4-year terms for a total of 8 years.
Right.
So that's when the clock started ticking on all the people that had been there for a long, long time. So I'm elected in 1999. In 2001, half of the city council is forced to retire because of term limits. So after 2 years, half the people are still sort of senior to me, half the people are still junior to me. 2 years after that, the rest basically retired. In 4 years, I went from being the new guy to the senior member. And a big deal was made about my age. What could this guy possibly know? He just turned 26. There's members that had been on the city council longer than I had been alive.
Really?
Wow.
And they've made
And they were forced to
no
retire.
secret about it. Right. But during those first 2 years when I was coming in, I had to establish myself as a peer and as a colleague, not someone who, I have grandkids your age, right? If we're working together and I have to fight for, my share of resources for my district or, my point of view and all the initiatives coming through the city, I need to establish myself as an equal, not as somebody that they just see as this young kid that just came in. So I worked hard, I went about it, pretty seriously. And so to me, it was sort of the biggest affirmation I can get that after 2 years, I had earned the trust and the confidence of a lot of those other members to vote for me to sort of be a leader of this body of leaders.
Yeah. Do you, how important is it while you were there, brand new in the council, that they passed this I guess it wasn't a law, but just a rule that you could only serve 2 terms. How important is that for the city to have?
Well, that happened before I was on city council, and since then it's been adjusted. So now it's 3 4-year terms. But we call it term limits. We have them, unfortunately, in my opinion, at the city level and at the state level, because I think from a leadership and a governance standpoint, we've all paid a cost to that. Just when somebody's getting good at their job, they're kicked out. And so on the one hand, I think they're a bad idea and they've had a negative impact. On the other hand, look, I probably wouldn't be sitting here as a state senator if it wasn't for term limits. They certainly have opened up the opportunities for new people to come into the political process. So I end with, I just think the term limits that we've had are too limited. But they've been adjusted at the city level now, I think, in a better way. People can serve up to 12 years. And even in the legislature, they've been changed. So people can serve up to 12 years now instead of just 6 in the Assembly or just 8 in the Senate. So a little bit better.
So do you think that you jumped from one successful campaign and position to the next after working with Cardenas, and then that was what gave you the confidence to just say, you know what, this is what I'm going to do forever now. I'm done with mechanical engineering. I know that you said it was the economy and that it was just a little bit ho-hum at Hughes Aircraft, but where did you go, I'm never going back to that?
Yeah. Well, you never know. I mean, I still live to this day. What if I don't win the next election or re-election? What would I do if I wasn't doing this? I think every elected official should always have that in the back of their mind, because we can't take these jobs for granted. And at the end of the day, it's sort of the accountability that we have to make sure that we're representing our constituents properly. Because if we're not, they could and should vote us out of office.
Right.
So you got to have that fear, got to have that edge, right?
Keeps things on the clean and knowing that there's pressure coming from beneath you or around you.
Right, exactly. So, after the first, I ended up managing a couple of campaigns, and always revolving around again the Northeast Valley, which is where I grew up. And so, when I ran for office, it was a little bit of adjustment. I was young, and I thought to myself, my gosh, for the last 3-4 years, on Saturday mornings, I've been putting on a suit and driving towards downtown or towards Hollywood or towards the West Side, to go to work. All my friends are putting Sea-Doos in the back of their truck, and they're heading out to Castaic. It's kind of a lifestyle choice that I made. That's sort of the visual that symbolizes,
It's great, man. That's really
how my
good.
life shifted. But it was for a purpose, because I was, again, trying to improve the community that I grew up in. And once I realized, look, there's a career opportunity here. Not so much that, I want to do this for the next 50 years, but there's a full-time job where I can get paid to do something I love, which is try to help other people, try to serve other people. And over the course of my time in office, if we can look at the communities of Sylmar and Pacoima and Sun Valley and Van Nuys and others in 10, 20 years backwards, saying, what, those neighborhoods are a lot better now than they used to be. And if some of the things I did along the way are reasons for that, then I'm happy. I'm proud.
What a great legacy.
Well, definitely. I mean, you just read my mind. I mean, you're leaving a legacy. Your legislative record has been described as groundbreaking and diverse. You've authored numerous bills that have been passed into law. Right. From tax incentives for businesses that support green manufacturing. Helping college athletes ensure an academic career in the event that they would get hurt,
Right.
paving the way for the driverless automobile, which I think is really cool. Like, they're all accolades, but if you could point to one,
Nice.
when your political career is said and done, that's at whatever point, long time in the future, what would you say was like, I did that?
Wow, hard to pick just one.
I know, man. Sorry.
So I'll mention a couple, if that's okay with you.
Yeah,
Breaking the
please.
rules
Yeah,
here,
yeah.
not just one.
No rules.
The first one, when I was on city council, fighting for the Children's Museum of Los Angeles to be located in the San Fernando Valley. At the time, it was, yes, there is a Children's Museum in LA. A lot of people kind of were aware of it because it used to be near City Hall, this small place, didn't do the children of the city justice. But they were looking for a new home, had a little bit of money, and I suggested way back when, it ought to be in the valley, not necessarily downtown or not necessarily on the west side, but out at Hampton Dam. And people thought I was nuts for suggesting it. But we worked at it, raised money for it, got political approval for it, and it's due to open next year. So I'm proud of that because there was so many naysayers. It'll never happen, can't do it, the valley's too far, all that stuff. So I'm proud of that. The other one is my menu labeling legislation. California became the first state in the nation to require chain restaurants to put, the calorie information on the menus and on menu boards in restaurants. New York was the first city, but we were the first state. And a couple years after we did it, it became part of the healthcare reform at the federal level. So it's in the process of getting implemented around the country. I point to that one, motivated to get into those kinds of issues because of my mom's diagnosis with diabetes.
Yeah.
Right. So that led me down the path of, okay, not just as a son, what can I do to help my mom, but as a legislator, what can I do to effectuate policies that will help people and try to address the epidemic? And again, the very first bill I introduced when I was in the legislature was that one. And people thought, oh my gosh, the Chamber of Commerce is against it, the Restaurant Association is against it, the retailers, a lot of the business community was against it. So we weren't shy about picking fights, when I first got to the legislature, even as a freshman. And it was vetoed the first year. I got it to the governor's desk. Arnold Schwarzenegger vetoed it, but we came right back.
Arnold vetoed it?
Yeah, Mr. Fitness, right? Mr.
Yeah.
Universe.
God damn it. That is.
But we came back the next year between some PR stuff and tweaking of the policy proposals. We got it to the governor again, and the second time he signed it.
Okay.
So that was a proud moment.
He smartened up.
He redeemed himself.
Yeah. He's like, wait a minute. I'm a fitness guy.
How many people does it take to author a bill? How many people are involved in this?
As little as one. That's when you get elected to the legislature. That's what you earn, an opportunity. Well, a desk in chambers to be able to sit and cast a vote on everything that comes your way, and the authority to be able to introduce legislation. Now, sometimes you get more legislators involved, so you can kind of show a coalition of support for it. But sometimes it's just one individual.
Well, we talked with one of our other guests about authoring papers in physics and how it's sort of a coup to get your name onto a published thing. So I'm just wondering how many people you've passed 70 bills now, if this website's up to date. That's correct. I mean, were you the single author on all of those bills?
On most of them, I was the author. On more than a handful of them, we worked with others. That's just my approach.
So cool.
To try to bring others into it, share the workload, if you will,
Right.
To line up votes and that sort of thing. Now that this year and next year are my last years in the Senate, so I'm already thinking, well, who else can I bring into this issue, this bill that I'm working on? Because when I'm gone, I want somebody else to keep this as a priority. So I'm
Right.
sort of handing off the torch in a way, if you will. But who authors a bill is one thing. There's 40 members of the state Senate. I have 39 colleagues. So to get anything approved, I need at least 21 people to vote for it. So even though their names aren't on the bill as authors, there's a significant number I have to go convince that this is a good idea. And when the Senate approves it, then I got to go do the same thing in the Assembly, and there's 80 of them. So I got to get at least 41 people to agree that this may be a good idea. And if I can get that far, then it goes to the governor, whoever the governor is at the time, and they can either sign it into law or veto it. So
After all that work, they can just slap it down.
oh yeah, and it's happened. Trust me, it's happened. As many.
So, sorry. Once you've got the approval of your colleagues, and then it gets to the governor's desk, do you have to do all the legwork again if it gets vetoed by him or her?
Well, it's a choice you make, right? If it gets vetoed, then do you give up? Say, well, it's going to be the same governor next year, so why waste my time? Why waste everybody else's time? Or do you kind of just double down on your efforts? Like, no, I'm still committed to this.
Yeah.
How can I tweak it? How can I, change the dynamic of it, and try to create a different environment for it to be considered by the governor and change our mind on signing versus veto.
So once Senate has gotten it to the governor's desk, and he vetoes it or she vetoes it, it still has to go through that process again once it's reintroduced.
Yeah, you
Okay.
basically start. You
Brand new. That's
go
why you
back
tweak
go
it
back to
and
start.
yeah.
Do not collect $200.
Do not collect. You talked earlier about being a little bit cynical in the early or mid 90s prior to getting involved. Why do you think so many Gen X and Yers are disenchanted with politics in general?
I can tell you why I was so cynical at the time. And I grew up in a neighborhood called Pacoima. I'm sure if you heard of it or what you may know about it.
I've heard of it.
I haven't heard of it.
And it was in the sort of, I was born in '73, so sort of mid '80s. I'm a teenager, kind of going through junior high school.
Yeah.
And think about what was happening in LA at the time, right? Gangs, crack epidemic, all that stuff. And in Pacoima, I used to tell my friends, I look out the window of the front window of my house and I see Miami Vice, right? There's shootings, there's drugs, there's prostitution, there's you name it, it's all right there. And so kind of a rough way to grow up or environment to grow up in. We didn't know any better. We just thought that was life. And part of the inspiration I got towards public service is seeing my parents get together with other parents in the neighborhood on that block and around the corner saying, you know what, politicians aren't showing up, police, it's hit and miss. If we're going to keep our kids safe, we got to organize and do something about it. And then as they started, doing a few things to try to clean up the neighborhood, then the police kind of engaged a little bit more. And as soon as things were starting to shift, then all the politicians start coming around, right? So I'm like, well, first of all, you know what? When I look at who's in Congress or who's in the legislature or who the governors were, it was just absolutely nothing I can relate to back then. And going through that experience is like, kind of what good are they for, right? And so it just seems interesting to me that this is what I end up doing for a living.
Yeah.
But it started with when I met Tony because I thought, well, maybe the other 119 legislators aren't properly focused or they're in it for the wrong reasons. But at least if there was one I can believe in, I want to be part of that. And in my experience, I've come to learn that look, most people that are in elected office are in it for the right reasons. We may disagree on how to get things done, but every Democrat and Republican will tell you it's all about better schools and a good economy and safe communities and all that stuff. We may have different ideas on how to get there, but to answer your question though about the cynicism, I think it's, as a young person, I just couldn't relate to it and didn't think it was relevant or could impact my life. And so I would imagine that a lot of the young people these days that are cynical are thinking the same thing, maybe for different reasons, right? The world has changed. We didn't have Facebook and Twitter and all the technology and ways to communicate back then that we do now. So we got to figure out how to.
Well, that's why it's just so exciting, right? Because here's the deal. I believe you because of where you came from and how you're doing this job, but I don't believe the people that are sort of, it's been a nepotistic way of handing down political power and you never had to struggle and work hard and you're going to tell me that this is the way education should be while your kids don't know anything about public schools, etc. It's you're the kind of politician people can believe in because you're relatable. Maybe that's the issue.
Which is why he's been successful. Which is why you're in the place where you're at, because the community that surrounds you and that is voting for you ultimately sees, that you're pure of heart and have the community's best interest, not just the community, but as the state as a whole, and then hopefully soon the nation as a whole. I mean, you talked about the bill you passed to have the caloric information
calorie counts.
Yeah, on menus that turned national, or it's in the process to turn national, right? I mean, you're already affecting on the bigger what am I saying? in the bigger picture of politics, I mean, you're already touching the nation, you know, and I think people feel that, and it's something that hopefully keep our fingers crossed for you, you know, when Secretary of State comes along in 2014. I mean, that's why you've been busy.
Right. It's
recently you're a lot.
Kind of going back to what we started off, you know, busier than I've ever been. It's, you know, the family front first and foremost. The day job, being a state senator, is a full-time job and then some. Right. And I've just launched my campaign for Secretary of State. So a statewide campaign, you know, on top of that, it's a lot going on. But staying organized, I've always known is important. Time management, I've always known is important. My latest personal lesson that I've been preaching about is energy management and how important that is. You know, because Chris, as you know, on the weeks that the legislature is in session, I go to the Capitol on Monday morning. I fly to Sacramento, and I'm there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I come back Thursday afternoon or Thursday evening. When I get home, you know, the last thing family needs is for me to try to pass out on the couch. Right?
Man, but that must be the only thing you want to do.
My wife needs to talk about some stuff. Roman wants to play. You know, I better change a couple of diapers, do my part. And so I think about that. And on Wednesdays, I make sure, okay, I got to get my 8 hours of sleep, kind of rest up, because there's a long weekend ahead of me when I get home, both at home and the work I got to do in LA, and, you know, catching up on different dimensions of the job. So, you know, managing your energy levels through the course of the week, through the course of the month, through the course of the year is something I'm appreciating more.
What kind of workload are we talking about? 60, 70 hours a week?
Easily. You know, when I'm in Sacramento, I may be different. I don't know, but I know that I'm in Sacramento sort of 3.5 days a week. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then half of Thursday. And in my mind, I got to get a week's worth of work done in half the time. So it's just my style, my nature. My first meeting is usually about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. And if I get home at the end of the night by 10 or 11, that's pretty good. Yeah. And that's just it. And I come home and, you know, do the other elements of it. But I love what I do, so I don't see it as work. I don't see it as tedious. I thrive in it. You can't get bored in this job. You know, constant challenges. Every day is different. But, you know, I'm just managing it all, making sure.
How big is your staff at this point to keep you on point?
To keep me on point, I'm fortunate. I've got a bigger staff than most, probably about 18 people or so between my Southern California office, my Capitol office. I chair the Energy Committee in the Senate, so then there's a couple of people who work for me just focusing on Energy Committee. So all told, it's about that.
So let me ask you a question, Alex. How has your outlook changed now that you're a dad? Like, is this gonna, I mean, obviously family's a staple in who you are. But now that, you know, you're a dad,
it's
how's it gonna change the decisions you make and the bills you try to pass? And I mean, does it influence you a lot?
It does. You know, it's the term, right? You just get it, but a lot deeper now. I mean, everybody knows growing up, you talk about, education's important, or, you know, children are the leaders of tomorrow, all that stuff generically. We get it. We don't disagree with it, but, you know, you get a much deeper understanding and appreciation for that. You know, I always talk about, leave things better for the next generation. But man, when you're holding your own flesh and blood in your arms or in your hands,
and it looks exactly like you,
and you look into his or her eyes, wow. I mean, it's almost, there's no words to describe it. But now I know, like, wow, when maybe, you know, after I pass for 25, 50 years from now, what kind of world are we leaving to the next generation? It's not a theoretical exercise anymore. It's real, and the responsibility that comes with it is real. And I just feel blessed that, you know, not only that I have children to try to, you know, mold into contributing members of society in the future, but a job that lets me try to put some things in place that maybe we won't see the benefits of until they're grown up and are the future doctors and senators and teachers and everything else.
So that being said, in your view, what's the biggest priority for California education reform at this point? Like, what needs to happen first?
Man, there's a list of things that need to happen in general.
Is there anything there in the machinations? Is there anything like happening right now that is?
I mean, on the one hand, the recent proposal by Governor Brown that actually supported to change how we distribute education funds in the state. You know, education across the board is underfunded compared to where it should be compared to other states. So, you know, his first proposal is yes, let's try to increase the overall level of spending, not just to education in general, but for every student in public schools in California. But what he did that was kind of revolutionary from the way it's been done in the past is he said, okay, everybody's going to get a base increase, but we're going to give supplemental amounts of funding to school districts that have students, per student that is either low-income student or is what we call an English learner. There's a lot of, nearly 1 in 4 students in California public schools is classified as an English learner. Most students actually they're born here, because some people think, oh, well, it's all these kids of immigrants that don't know the language, et cetera, et cetera. No, domestically born kids that aren't up to snuff on English for their age or their grade level. So that provides a unique challenge for schools and school districts. Hey, how do you keep up with the math? How do you keep up with the history? How do you keep up with literature and all that if you don't even have the basic language skill set yet? So there's supplemental per student for those particular schools. Then on top of that, another supplemental amount of funding for school districts with a certain percent. If your school district has 55% or more of either low-income students or English learners, then you have unique challenges because there's a concentration of that student population with extra needs and extra challenges. As common sense as that may sound as I'm explaining it to you, it was actually pretty revolutionary when he proposed it, controversial as it was being considered by the legislature, but
Really?
it got implemented. So you have things like, how we spend our money. You have things like, you're sitting here with a laptop in front of you and, technologies. I didn't call anybody out here.
I got my notes.
When I was a kid and I'd go over to my cousin's house, the first thing we'd do is, are we playing baseball, basketball, football?
Yeah.
Nowadays I see kids that get together and they huddle and they're texting each other, or they're like, let's get a hold of so-and-so. So technology is really changing how kids are learning, how kids are communicating, how kids are processing through their brain. But we don't have the curriculum in our schools that reflects that.
Yeah.
And in some ways it's good. It provides opportunity to maybe teach different material or at least teach differently. And in some cases it's a threat, because that's not the complete substitute for all the concepts that we need every first grader, every fifth grader, every 12th grader to learn. So that would be another challenge I'd put on the front burner. And then, the biggest one for me is parental involvement. I was blessed because I had parents who cared. But on the other hand, my parents didn't know exactly how to support me in my studies. They weren't tutoring me by the time, I was in the 8th grade. They just knew that grades were important and they were, on me for that. So you have a lot of parents that do care about their kids and provide that same environment at home or priorities at home. But you have a lot of parents that are intimidated about getting involved in their kid's school or asking the teacher a question or the principal a question. And that's got to change, because there's no bigger factor in my experience in whether a kid succeeds or not than how involved their parents are.
Right.
So that's across the board. That's in, you see that in urban school districts and rural school districts in Northern California, Southern California, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
a great answer.
My mom's right in the same boat. She didn't, very timid and shy. She didn't ask a lot of questions. I guess I was an outlier as you were. I mean, the odds of you getting to MIT weren't on your side.
Right.
And that shaped who you were, and it's something that I think.
And you know what the kicker is, Chris? You mentioned, the odds of me getting to MIT, but I did. Part of what I carry with me in the job that I do, I remember the late nights at MIT, sleepless nights at MIT, cramming for exams or just trying to keep up with the homework or whatever, and walking back to the apartment at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, think to myself, why am I here? Because I had friends in high school that were smarter than me.
Yeah.
And they weren't getting that opportunity. People that I honestly to this day feel they deserve that opportunity to go to a school like MIT more than I did. Why aren't they here? Why do they either maybe settle for a different kind of school, or maybe they didn't go on to college at all? Was it because they didn't want to? Was it because the parental support or direction drive wasn't there, or whatever else. I mean, I'm a firm believer every kid has the potential to do anything they want to be. So it's up to us, not just as parents, but as a community. It takes a village to make sure every kid lives up to that potential.
Yeah, speaking of MIT, I mean, you're on the governing board as well, right?
Yeah.
That's something else that, he's has to add to his schedule.
Yep.
Governing board at MIT, Naleo president.
Right. In my spare time, serve on a couple of boards for organizations that I believe in. But
I don't know how you have time to play golf, man.
Yeah, I can't believe you can do anything. So how will your job change, assuming you win and become Secretary of the State?
When he wins?
When you win.
So in a couple of ways, I mean, the job fundamentally is different. Being in the legislature, you're a policymaker, you're a legislator, your schedule, your rhythm is kind of tied to the legislative session and that process. The Secretary of State's one of what we call a constitutional officer. The statewide elected offices, there's a governor, there's a lieutenant governor, an attorney general, a treasurer, controller, superintendent of public instruction, and the Secretary of State. So you're in the executive branch. All of a sudden, remember the high school government class, executive, judicial, legislative, separation of powers.
Yeah, that was like 1 month worth of teaching. And the funny thing is, Americans, I feel like on the whole, know nothing about their government and how it works. It's very complicated from just a generalized standpoint, right?
And not everybody needs to be an expert, but for explaining the job itself, it's part of the executive branch. And most people see the Secretary of State's office as the chief elections officer. It's the top state official when it comes to elections administration, voter registration, and all that comes with that process. The largest unit within the Secretary of State's office is actually the business unit. If you're going to start a company in California, the first step you got to do is incorporate. Or even a nonprofit organization. First thing you got to do is incorporate. And the Secretary of State's office manages that function and all the paperwork that's involved with that. I won't go on a complete campaign spiel here, but that
You're
office,
allowed to, though.
That office can use some modernization, if you will. Doing more things online, more transactions, more quickly, more efficiently, not just for the sake of the office and the state government side, but even more so for the business side and for the public side.
Okay.
Agreed.
So if I'm elected to that office, I won't be tied to the Monday through Thursday thing in Sacramento. The main office for that office is in Sacramento, but there's a Los Angeles office. In the past, there has been also a Central Valley office, maybe a San Francisco office. In this day and age, given technology, you can kind of work from anywhere. So I'm looking forward to a little bit of the flexibility as to where I have to be day in, day out, week in, week out.
Is it imprudent to talk about your ultimate goals in politics at an early stage to say, in other words, you would never say, yeah, I'm going to be president in 15, 20 years?
No, it's not imprudent. I get asked a question all the time, do you want to run for president?
You're obviously a rising star in the party, and people will look at you and go, this guy's got some gusto. And
look, I appreciate that to the extent that people observe that. Obviously, that feels good, but I'm still a big believer in do a good job with what's in front of you, and other opportunities will present themselves, right? Long term, maybe there's an opportunity for me to work in D.C. someday, but you can't get that long term vision get in the way of delivering on your responsibility today. So
awesome.
Well, I mean, it seems like
Man.
the things that have come your way, they were just destined. I mean,
a lot of hard work, but
I can't imagine that you knew helping Tony
Was
early
gonna lead
on
to this.
that you'd be running for Secretary of State next year.
Right.
I can't imagine that was your long-term goal.
So some people would suggest, oh no, you gotta have a plan, right?
Right.
To some extent, yeah, you gotta have a plan, but you gotta be flexible in that plan because there's stuff that happens that you just don't expect. Some of it is timing, right? If in this day and age with term limits here, term limits there, maybe the timing is right, maybe the timing is way off for what you may want to do next. So those sorts of things. But I was just gonna say, my mom has a saying, del plato a la boca se cae la sopa, which the translation is, from the bowl to your mouth, that's where the soup is spilt. Right?
Yeah.
So, okay, you got it in the spoon here. Not
Point A
not
to
big
point B.
distance, but that's where it's spilt if you're not
Yeah.
concentrating, if you're not focusing.
right.
So,
It's a great
That's
thing.
great.
It's a great thing. There was, I want to bring up the fact that, speaking of long-term goals,
there's certain people in the city council that wanted you to run for mayor, correct? And you declined?
Yeah, I thought long and hard about it. I'll be honest, this is LA Real Show, right?
Yeah, get real, man.
Probably the toughest decision I've made since I've been in politics.
Really?
It was a tough decision, not because I was deciding to do something, but a tough decision to not do something. Had my team of people and friends around me like, okay, is this a real option for us? The interest was absolutely there. Is the strategy there to get the votes, the support, raise the money, all those things. And I saw a path to being, I think, a viable candidate and maybe one of the top candidates. But the decision to not do it was based for me on two things. First and foremost, the personal front. I was just getting, had a girlfriend at the time, was falling in love and wanted to take our relationship to the next level, saw myself getting married and starting a family. And running for mayor requires politically, close about the better part of 2 years, just day in, day out, knock down, drag out campaigning. So I asked myself in 5-10 years looking back, could I have run for mayor and gotten elected and gotten married and started a family? Yeah, it's possible, but man, it would have been tough to juggle all that.
Again, he picked family.
So if I had to choose, what would I rather have? Been mayor and maybe lost the love of my life, or been married, have a kid or two, maybe more, and not have been elected mayor. And maybe running for mayor is in the cards somewhere in the future, maybe not. I'm happy with my choice. The other part of the decision for me was, my opportunity in the legislature. 2 4-year terms. For me to run for mayor would have been close to about year 4 out of those 8 for me. So
Wow.
If I would have run for mayor, it would have been politically kind of foregoing that second term. I still would have been a senator and voted and lived up to my minimal responsibilities. But the practical effect it would have had for me in the Capitol was, oh, well, he's focused on running for mayor now. He's not focused on the Capitol. He's not as maybe relevant or influential here because his focus and priorities elsewhere. So I'd worked too hard to get elected to the Senate and to tee up some of the issues that I've been working on to kind of just walk away from it for the last 4 or 5 years. So, again, maybe the opportunity presents itself in the future, maybe not. We'll see. But I sleep well at night with the decision that I made.
Good for you.
Yeah. And you already had a short stint as acting mayor, right?
Yeah, during the 9/11 crisis.
Yeah, that was, I'll never forget that day.
None of us.
I was, believe it or not, Chris, in a stretch where I was working out 4 or 5 days a week at the time. But that one day, for some reason, the alarm clock went off. I'm like, I'm tired. I'll just skip it today. Hit snooze. And a friend of mine called and said, wake up. Are you watching the news? No, what's going on? Something's happening in New York. You should turn the TV on. So I turned, it was Channel 4, KNBC, and the first tower was already smoking. And saw the plane hit the second tower live.
Oh, I hate that.
And right away, I'm just shocked into being awake. And I remember reading the print at the bottom of the screen. 4 planes unaccounted for headed towards Los Angeles. And then it hit me, wait a minute, the mayor of LA is in Washington, D.C. right now. I'm acting mayor. The president of the council serves as acting mayor when the mayor's out of state. And so right away, I'm on the phone with the police chief. I'm on the phone with my chief of staff, and I realized I just got to stop getting on the phone, just shower up, get dressed, and head downtown to City Hall. And that began the first of about 3-4 days of just nonstop. What's going on? Learning just as the world was learning in real time what was happening. But to be in charge of the second largest city in America, not knowing what could or couldn't happen, was kind of a heady experience. And I remember after the first 24 hours in huddling with the emergency operations people in LA and being in touch with federal agencies, state agencies, and others, we try to keep the public informed as to what was going on. And when it got to the point on day 2 where, okay, everybody go back to work, no credible threats headed to Los Angeles, the police chief said his piece, the fire chief, the airport director, all these other people. And I'm like, well, what's my part? I'm the acting mayor, but you're the experts here. What am I supposed to say? Well, your job is to just make people, have people go back to normal and be calm. Like, well, how do you do that? Who writes that script? But, we tried to articulate that. I remember going back into the emergency operations room and asking them, well, how do we know if they heard us? What do you mean? I'm like, well, yeah, you told me to tell everybody to go back to normal. How do we know if the message got across? How do you measure that? And I'm like, then something kicked into me. I'm like, hey, aren't you the liaison to the school district? Call and find out what the attendance was today. Because if 50% of the kids were not in school, they didn't hear us. If 90% of the kids are in school, they heard us. Hey, aren't you the liaison to the MTA? Call over there. What's bus ridership this morning? Because if it's 40%, they didn't hear us. If it's 85, 90%, then they heard, all just like
Very
metrics,
practical,
right?
Yeah, practical metrics.
Yeah, just kind of, there's that engineer common sense.
Right.
Something to make that. Then I thought, okay, well, now you got to lead by example. So how do you demonstrate to people it's safe to return back to normal? I pulled a couple of my council colleagues at the time, like, come on, the media's chasing us everywhere we go. Let's go to get Tommy's. They're like, you know what? If the city officials are outside having Tommy burgers on the corner of, Rampart and First, things must be all right. So just try to lead by example.
That's what's up, man. It just made me laugh. Sorry.
The last time I had Tommy's too.
Yeah. Oh, really? I have some questions about just sort of a list of stuff. I don't know if you have any good sound bites and I'm not asking that you do, but what's the current plan to improve energy efficient mass transit in LA? And you may or may not know what that is. I'm just curious.
It's we've come a long way in the city, especially with our rail service, right? The red line, the blue line, the gold line, the green line, in a way that most people across the country don't even realize. We have just as much ridership, if not more so, on some of our lines than they do in, Boston, Chicago, New York, Dallas, and other places. So when you say energy efficient, I'm not sure if it's is it running the trains more efficiently? Is it a clean, bus fleet, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, clean bus fleet, or just trying to get some of the cars off the road and giving people an option to get downtown from the west side or into the valley from LAX without driving their car all the time.
Right. So I think it's both building out the infrastructure, and a lot of people focus on the subways or the rail lines without enough of an appreciation for the bus service that we have.
Right.
MTA's, believe it, I think, come a long way in not just the local lines that stop every other block, but things like Metro Rapid. A lot of it's awareness and a shift in thinking. Where I live now in the Sherman Oaks area, we're not too far off Ventura Boulevard. So there's been a couple times when we first moved in that I tell Angela, who's coming in from work, you know what, pick up Roman and I'll meet you over here. Let's go out to dinner on a Friday night. Well, what are we going to do with 2 cars? I'll just take the bus and I'll meet you over there. Really?
Can you do that?
and I don't mind. It's getting people to think, I can take the bus because I choose to, not because I have to.
Right.
A lot of people in LA take the bus because they have to. But there's a lot of us that can and should take the bus from time to time or the red line from time to time because we choose to. If I have a handful of meetings I got to do downtown, I'll try to cluster them around those subway stops, and I'll take the red line in, get off on 7th and Fig. Plenty of offices for me to have to visit around there, do a breakfast meeting, a lunch meeting, whatever. Jump back on the red line and get back to the valley that way. Don't have to deal with traffic, don't have to deal with parking.
It's great.
But a lot of my friends that could probably do that from time to time don't, because nobody's told them that they should or could or showed them how.
Yeah.
We're still building out. There's more rail lines to build, I think, especially as our population continues to grow. And the bus service will always be tweaked and routes kind of shifted as the demand demonstrates for it. But we have a pretty good system now that's, as used as it is probably still underutilized.
Okay.
I just checked the time, and he has a meeting at 5:30, and I definitely don't want to make you late for that.
No,
really appreciate the fact that you
right.
stopped by, man. One last important question, man.
I was gonna say we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah, man, we could talk to you all night.
Politicians and microphones, man.
Well, most importantly, when are we playing golf?
Really? Really? I'm sorry. I'm
No,
sorry.
no,
I'm
no,
sorry,
trust me.
viewers.
that in
Don't
and
be
of itself
apologizing
is
for
a
me, dude.
story.
Don't be apologizing for me.
Growing up, never would imagine I'd play golf. But it's one of those things where, in this line of work, when I first got elected, all of a sudden there's invitations to tournaments, or this business guy wants to go play golf. Like, I better learn, because if there's things that I could be accomplishing or delivering for my district that, somebody wants to handle on a golf course, and if I don't, I'm missing out on that. So it just so happens that as I learned, I liked it. I'm not great at it, but I'm respectable. Just time is tight right now.
Yeah, man, I know.
But
I've been.
in-
He was
but
the reason that I started. One of the reasons that I started playing. He gave me.
Well,
my
you've
first
created a
book.
monster, Alex. Thanks for nothing.
There's the book behind Thomas.
Oh, there you go. Ben Hogan.
book. He's
The
one
5
of,
lessons.
One of my Christmas presents from you. Thank you.
But we'll get out there the next couple of weeks. If nothing else, to the driving range.
Yeah, for sure.
But definitely, I gotta get the rust out of my own clubs.
Well, listen, Alex. When you get elected, Secretary of State, when you find the time,
You have even less time.
yeah, we'll
No.
we'll make some time for you. If you can make some time for us, man, we'd love to hear what good things you're doing for the state and what the future holds, man. Really.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah,
Thank
man.
you
Only
for
scratched
having
the
me.
surface. Love to
Thank
have
you
you
for-
back whenever you can.
Thank you for the coffee.
Yes, sir. I hate that we have to cut it short, but you got to go.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to do it again. That's all.
Absolutely.
Amen to that.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Keep living the dream.